Everybody, thanks for joining us today at Sunnyside. It is Japanese Maple Day today, one of my favorite classes of the whole year. I'm Trevor Cameron, our general manager. Say hi to Nicole, she's back there.
Good morning.
We both have some pretty stuff behind us today. I brought some trees in so it actually looks, instead of the pallet wall, hopefully you like the view a little better. I think Mr. Smith, the Whistling Gardener's in the house too, doing some chat questions, so make sure you give him some hard ones. He'll be answering some questions during class. Just a reminder, this is recorded. You can always go back and watch it if you like. We're going to go fast and furious. There's a lot of information to cover, like all the classes. So we'll get going here right away. You'll see my friend Dr. Lola here in the background. The Everett Clinic is always really kind to sponsor one class a month for us. Just to remind everybody, if you haven't been at one of the other ones, we don't collect money from the Everett Clinic for doing this. I think it's a great thing for you, our customers that are local. They're going to contribute $50 gift cards. I'm going to ask a question at the end of the class. Nicole's going to monitor the chat. It's not a typing contest for speed. She'll pick 5 random winners. You guys will get an email or a phone call to let you know you won a free $50 gift card to spend out the store here. So thank you to the Everett Clinic. It's a great local business. You know, I'm an Everett resident, have been pretty much my whole life, and the Everett Clinic is providing excellent care to everybody in our community. So thank you again, Everett Clinic. Hopefully everybody got access to the handouts. There was 2. Nicole might have combined them into one. We have kind of a Japanese maple outline for the class, and I had a specific sheet on container maples. If you're interested in growing some Japanese maples in pots, that's a great little reference, kind of on soil mixture, how to decide how to attack a little container maple specimen. We have a great website. Nicole spends a lot of time, on this all through the season. We sit in the winter and update our pages consistently. There's a 22 Japanese maple list available online of the varieties we tend to carry. There's great pictures, great information. So I would certainly encourage you to explore that as well. For me personally, someone reminded me, this is my 30th year running a nursery, so I must be getting old for one. That's why the hair's gone and gray. But I really love plants. My first addiction was Japanese maples, I'll be honest. Way back in the day, I was fascinated with Japanese maples. Even going back to high school, for me, the amount of variation, the different foliages, there is a lot of them available at nurseries like Sunnyside. So we have a great selection here. You can certainly find a lot of extraordinarily weird ones online, although sometimes maybe not the easiest to locate. But Japanese maples are one of our staple plants here at Sunnyside as well. One thing I thought I would mention, a lot of people may ask about, well, how can I grow my own? How can I do seedlings? This is not as simple as you have a Japanese maple and the seeds drop, the little helicopters we used to call them as kids, drop in the soil, they stratify, they sprout. You can collect them, sure. Typically, you are not going to have the same tree as the parent tree that produced them. So those are what we would call seedling maples. A lot of variation, tend to be maybe a little larger, a little quicker growing. Some you may find something interesting. They're all going to be a little bit unique. So seedling maples is part, grafted maples are the other half. And at a nursery like Sunnyside, all of our maples will be grafted. So a grower takes a quality rootstock and buds the scion wood of the exact maple you want cloned onto that rootstock. So that way you're always going to have that consistent variety, that cultivar, that flavor, sometimes I call them, will give you the color that you desire, okay? We call this tree the tree for all seasons, because I think if you look behind me, you can see a bit of the colors I brought in. But, the Japanese maples all get great fall color, but I think they're a pretty spring tree too. A lot of maples I like, one color in spring, little different color in summer, turn electric color for fall. And I think maples have a beautiful silhouette branching pattern for the winter as well. So again, the tree for all seasons, a very manageable garden-sized tree for really every size home, every size garden. There's going to be an appropriate maple we can try. So let's go through. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second. I've got a lot of slideshow to show you. And we will get this. One second here. For some reason, my slideshow button is not working. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, so there's the tree for all seasons. Now, I thought, especially since Everett Clinic is sponsoring this, we should start out with the nursery disease, I call it. Years ago, I started calling it Acer Palmatum Itis. So that definition is somewhat contagious mental condition of the gardener who shows extreme addiction to Japanese maples of any kind. Symptoms include having multiple specimens in the landscape, followed by countless pots sited all around the garden and home, with maples in them, of course. Explanation from the customer, the patient always is to me, but I have room for one more. And that's frankly me too. So if I don't have any room left, I'm out of room in the yard, I buy a pot and add another maple so that way I can keep the addiction going. So if we kind of look at, some general stuff at maples, we'll show a lot of pictures here, some specific ones. But if we kind of look at maples, again, there's a maple for every spot in the yard, whether it's sun, whether it's shade, whether it's half and half, what color you want, what form you want weeping, you want upright, you want round. There really is a maple for every spot in the garden. One huge thing, like I mentioned, is paying attention to sun versus shade. Right plant in the right place is always going to give you success as a gardener. We want to make sure if we have a hotter afternoon sunspot that we want to get an appropriate maple that won't burn when we finally get hot in the summer in July and August. We want something that'll take the heat. Vice versa, a lot of us have shade here in our local area. We want something that will give us great color and maybe produce some variegation or something in shade or morning sun only. So you'll see a lot of times on our list, things denoted for morning sun best, PM shade, that kind of thing. That will give you the crisp, vibrant color that you want and not, again, have that sunburn as we get into the hot part of the summer. I think there's some beautiful spring maples. I probably gravitate towards the spring colored ones because they also turn great color in the fall. But you can see a lot of the different variations behind me, from oranges to greens to pinks to fuchsia to red to purple. We can really get a very nice spring color maple as well. One thing for me, we'll talk about drainage and and maybe some potential issues with maples and landscapes. But I would always consider mounding my maples when I plant them. Maybe it's not, we're not talking about an anthill, but if we just kind of gently berm up areas in our garden, it will help with the drainage. To me, it highlights the tree a little bit, allows us to do some underplanting, but it will be that farther up out of that groundwater to maybe keep our maple a little bit safer if we're worried about drainage. Now, if we talk planting real quick, you're always going to want to dig a hole about twice as wide, twice as deep as you can. I'm always going to take my native pile of dirt I dug out and mix about a third compost to that 2/3 native. That'll be a nice mixture to get that tree started. In a container grown maple, typically we'll pull it out of the pot. And if I see some surface roots, that's not a bad thing, but I want to take my pruners, maybe my hoary knife, a little anything, and not cut into it and tear it apart, but lightly score the outside and just loosen that root ball a little bit. That will tell that tree, okay, we're not in our pot anymore. We've got some free open soil that we can get a root system established. So we want to be gentle, but we want to for sure do a little bit of scoring. A big one with me is the burlap. When we buy maybe a larger container, a field-grown Japanese maple that is dug out of a farm, put in burlap, tied up, and then potted maybe by Sunnyside to sell, we want to make sure we're real careful with those burlap specimens. We don't want to pick it up, take the burlap off, pick it up, drop it in the hole. We crack the root ball, we lose the tree. So we want to make sure that we're careful to place it in the hole at the right level, start backfilling, get that tree probably half planted, and then cut the twine away from the trunk, off the sides, either peel the burlap and bury it. I typically will grab my knife, pruners, and just cut that top excess off. The burlap rots away very quick, but we don't want it tied to the trunk. That twine above the ground is going to be a problem down the road. So make sure we take it off, but after it is in the planting hole, okay? Always use a good organic starter fertilizer. Sure Start is our go-to fertilizer for this place. Another nursery I ran, it's a great organic transplant fertilizer that will get the root system kicking. So make sure we use Sure Start in our planting hole. Typically, I'll put maybe a quarter cup, a half a cup, maybe towards the bottom of the hole, get it all planted. Also put a little rim around the surface and then mulch or compost right over the top of that. Now I've got feeding going down through the whole root structure, and I'm going to get a nice established maple quickly. there's the two products. You know, for us, it's all about EB Stone Organics, a great organic company. We have all their soils and fertilizers. We would use their Sure Start. And then again, typical planting compost is a great way to go for amending all plants, really, but certainly maples. Now, if we do pruning real quick, this is always hard to do, you know, on a Zoom seminar, shall we say. But we want to look at a couple things. You know, we're kind of down towards the end of winter here. Things are leafing out. Sap is flowing right now. I'm not interested in probably running out this weekend and doing a major prune job. Let your tree leaf out, let it kind of settle in for spring, and then we can go back and do some pruning later spring, early summer. If you make yourself a note, you know, kind of for the future, I always want to walk out. I did all mine a month or two ago in my own yard. You want to walk out and attack structure issues in the winter. I have no foliage. I can see where there's crossing branches, a bad angle, maybe lighten the branch up a little bit, open up the center, thin it out, remove dead wood. All those things are really easy to do in the winter. You can certainly go back and do that here after they leaf out as well. The one thing you have to do in the winter is your lace leaf maples. I know a couple people emailed before class. I hope he's going to talk about lace leaf pruning. Yes, we will mention it here. You know, if I'm going to attack my lace leaf, once it leaves out, it's a big, thick mushroom, weeping shape, is always our lace leaf varieties of Japanese maples. It's really hard to get in and do any kind of accurate pruning when they have foliage on them. It's hard to see the branches temporarily. If we need to kind of limb it up a little bit to get it off the lawn, the flowers, whatever, if it's a little low, we can do that. But I would really mark yourself a date next winter when there's no foliage on, get underneath that thing and look up. You'll see a whole bunch of beigeish, grayish, maybe dead wood that can easily be snapped out. You won't even have to prune it. I'll grab my gloves and just kind of touch branches here and there and let all that old dead wood fall out. It's not a disease. It's not necessarily a problem. It's just wood that's been shaded, you know, by the outer shell. We get that all out of there. A lot of times customers stand back and go, wow, my tree looks great again, just by getting all that dead wood out. So I would always remove the dead wood on a lace leaf, then look at the branching structure, and that's going to be up to you. You know, I like mine open in sections and airy so I can see the branching pattern. You may like yours a little twiggy and you know, and thicker. That's up to you. It's your yard, it's your tree, not mine. So you can do it either way, you know, whatever kind of catches your fancy. You know, one thing, like I said, I don't do as much maybe immediately right now that we're leafing out. This can be attacked in the winter. Maybe we wait until mid-May, late May, early June, and it's a great time to go out and do some thinning. And certainly heading back too, you can look at that tree now that it's leafed out, maybe pick some branches to remove, open up the structure a little bit. Maybe you've got a garden underneath it and you'd like a little more light to come through. Very easy to thin out Japanese maples. These are trees that really don't have a central leader. So, you know, I'm not as worried about topping a Japanese maple maybe as I am shade trees, conifers, other types of specimens. Typical maples are going to come up and fork out into a vase shape on the majority of them. So it's not as much of an issue to shorten the height here and there if you need to. Now, if we talk fertilizing real quick, you know, again, I would always go organic fertilizer. There's never a chance to burn anything if I use organic. Maples just need some nitrogen, you know, to get you healthy leaves, get you a nice flush of growth every year. A little bit of phosphorus, potassium is fine too. But I think this tree shrub food from EB Stone's perfect. That's 722. If we go through and do a dose here in, you know, just past, if we haven't done it, you can do it now. But if I feed in that March, April time frame, that's going to give me a nice flush of growth. Maybe I want a little more leaves. I want a thicker tree. Maybe I'm trying to block the neighbor a little bit. You know, that's going to give me a foliage. If I want thicker branching, I'm going to do a second feeding in June. I don't think you'll have to feed much more than that. It's no different in a container. You can follow that same schedule. But I usually ask people this that come in, you know, should I fertilize my maple? I don't feed mine every single year. You know, I'll be honest, if the soil's happy, the tree's happy, I'm happy. I'm not going to worry about it. But if you want to get maybe a struggling tree a little kick, maybe it's newly planted, you'd like to get a little more growth on it quicker, 2 times a year with something like that is plenty. You know, just coming out of winter and that early time frame in spring. You know, I always ask people, okay, we're wet, you know, in the spring, everybody knows that. If I walk out in May and I look at my tree and it's just covered in moisture and the branches are almost hanging to the ground because it's so heavy and wet, that probably tells me Maybe I've got a little bit too much foliage and I need to get some thicker branching and develop the caliper of the tree. So I may skip that spring feeding and go to that early summer feeding. That will help me with a second flush of growth for sure, but it will also help build some girth on some of those branches that might hold that tree up a little bit better as well. Now we'll talk about maybe the two things that I see around here. I'll just mention this, you know, no plant is immune to aphids or a simple little sucking insect like that. You know, my rule for spraying maples is this: never, ever, ever anything systemic. If you spray a Japanese maple with a systemic type insecticide, fungicide, you are going to burn it. I mean, I'm going to be honest. So if you find your favorite organic concoction, whether, you know, whatever it is, or a safe chemical, my rule is if it's listed for use on vegetables, you're going to be fine to use it on your maple and not burn it. So that's the insect half of this. I would worry more in our neck of the woods about disease. You know, the two things I see are these next two slides. Verticillium wilt is a really hard problem to deal with. I'll be honest, all of us, me, Nicole, I hate to tell you, Mr. Smith back there, everybody who lives up here has verticillium fungi in their soil at some depth. It's in the groundwater. The problem is when we have hard pan clay, a wet winter, that water table comes up through the soil. And if we have maple roots sitting in that groundwater with verticillium, we're going to have problems. There's no cure for this. There's no magical spray. I don't have an answer for you how to get rid of it. It is there, and it's going to let you know pretty quick. If you have a tree, an old tree, young tree, whatever that tree is, say you've had it for 10 years and you walk out this spring and the whole thing looks like it's going to leaf out, and then one big branch almost looks like you lit a match to it and it just shrivels and dies. Maybe half the tree, maybe the whole tree does. Typically verticillium will take one chunk at a time. That's going to be a red flag to you to say, okay, something's going on here with drainage, the root system. I got to fix this or I'm going to lose this tree. And sometimes it's already past that point of no return, but you've got to watch it here in spring. The only way you're ever going to tell if you do have a verticillium issue is a soil test, which is available at some of the soil labs, or B, when I cut a dead limb, I cut my tree down, I look at that cross section, just like that picture, and you're always going to see a dark black or brown bullseye, you know, kind of ring around the tissue. That's going to let you know, okay, I probably got verticillium in my soil. Maybe I shouldn't do maples here. Maybe I have to fix my drainage. You know, there's some options to look at. You know, I'll use me as an example. I think I wasted a number of hundreds of dollars in front of my kitchen window myself, you know, 20 years ago, trying to get a maple going that I had drainage issues, and I dug down 3 feet and I dug down 4 feet. I'll win. No, I didn't win. I think I wasted 3 trees before I said, you know what, something else will grow very nicely there that I don't have to worry about anymore, because I got tired of losing my coral bark maple. So there's a lot of plants that are totally immune to verticillium, some that are resistant. There's other things that are very prone. Unfortunately, Japanese maple would be one of the very prone ones. So check your drainage is the point of this discussion. Dig your hole. If you got hard pan clay, you better break it up. Add some compost. Keep your fingers crossed. Berm up above ground a little bit sometimes helps. I mean, there's things we can do, but if you've been fighting it in a spot and you've lost a number of trees, do not waste your money. You can ask me, the staff, look online. There's some other great plant options that you would not have the same problems with, okay? The other one I see is Pseudomonas, and that telltale is always going to be black. I picked a coral bark picture here, because I hate to tell you, coral bark's the most susceptible to Pseudomonas, but also it's very noticeable. You can look at that wood color and go, what is going on with that? I got a big black streak or a black tip. It's dying back. You know, this is something we can spray for to some extent. Copper fungicides work very well. If you have a coral bark, I would recommend you get out in the winter and you spray it with a copper fungicide, perhaps once as a dormant spray. That would help. But I would walk out every spring and make sure to look at your tree as it's leafing out and get rid of dead stubs that might be showing black before it has a chance to go through the tissue system and infect a major branch or the trunk. Then, you know, then again, we've got some problems getting it out of the system. So make sure, the one thing I put it on this slide with both of these problems, be really careful with your pruners, your saws, whatever your cutting devices that you choose. We have to keep those sterilized. The worst thing is you got a problem with one tree, you don't have it on 6 others in your yard. I go saw a dead branch on that one, and then I go work on another tree. It's very easy to transfer a lot of these tissue pathogens from specimen to specimen by pruning equipment. So always sterilize your pruners, be careful what you cut, and then head to the next tree, okay? Now, if we talk pots real quick, you know, I'll smile for me because I'm out of room. I should count how many maples I have in my yard. It's not crazy. I know some people that have way too many more than I do, like 70 in their yard, which is outrageous. It's pretty much a yard of maples, which is cool, but I like other plants too. You know, I feed my addiction now with containers. It's really easy to come down and find a pretty pot here at Sunnyside. Our pots are always half price for outside, by the way. So I find a cool pot, take it home. I can try another little maple I want, play with it in the pot for a few years, and then worry about finding somewhere to find it at a yard or give to a friend or donate to the Arboretum or something fun. So yes, I have a lot of potted maples in my landscape too, because that allows me to have a few more, and I can always try them out every year that way. So, you know, look at when you choose a container maple, everything grows in a pot. I don't need to tell you that, but how long do you want it to last in a pot? How much sun, how much shade, all the same different questions, you know, we would go through to get you a nice specimen. You know, I have some, you know, typically I want to have it in the pot for 10 years before I got to worry about it. There's a lot of them that will outgrow their pot in just a couple years. So I'm careful which ones I choose, a little more dwarf ones, slower growing ones that I can prune a bit if I need, that won't max out the pot very quickly, and will give me a nice specimen for a number of years. I don't want to replace it every single season. We're not going to buy a little tiny pot. We'll have to keep upshifting it as we go through. Now, I'll just mention, you know, with the pots, you know, always use a great organic potting soil. We swear by Edna's Best. That's what I use in my own house. Good organic soil from E.B. Stone. That's one I'll mix a little bit of compost with, use it as my container mixture. And I, kind of being OCD, I don't like looking at potting soil on the surface, so I always sprinkle a little compost over the top as kind of a mulch, you know, just like I would in the yard. So the tree is going to be really happy with that. I'm never going to get Miracle-Gro Moisture Control, any brand that says moisture control potting soil. That is going to hold too much moisture, and again, have that maple be unhappy long term. So make sure it's a really good, well-drained soil that doesn't hold too much moisture. That's one key. Number two, this has gotten me a couple times over the years. If you've got the sidewalk, the hard patio, the deck, always get pot feet, little spacers. We carry pot risers, a great way to go. That's cheap. You won't ever see them, but it just levitates that container just an inch or two off of the ground. I don't want the pot sitting on a hard surface. I might create tension, suction, and that water will not go through. This has happened to a couple of my trees going back a lot of years ago before I learned better. All of mine are either up on rock or they have those pot risers underneath them to make sure the drainage is optimum and I'm not going to clog that drain hole down the road, okay? You know, the one question I'm sure somebody's going to ask, I'm like Trevor, I got a bunch of maples in pots. How do I know when to repot them? You know, check them this time of year. If I go to the edge of the container and I kind of try to get my fingers in there, if I'm feeling a solid surface fruit, that thing is probably root bound, may need to get replaced. It's the same thing with transplanting. I get a bigger pot or the ground, I lightly score the outside, and I have an easy, successful transplant. Maybe if you haven't yet, let it leaf out. It's in the process of everything's budding right now. Let it leaf out, then we can move it very quickly. It's no different, you know, transplanting one in the yard from place to place should only be done in the winter. If I'm going from a container to the ground, it would be just like coming down to Sunnyside today and buying a new maple tree, taking it home and siting it in your landscape. So certainly that can still be done here as we head into springtime. The other thing I'd watch with on the containers is last summer. Think in your brain, what happened last summer? I watered that thing quite a bit and it still maybe got a little dry. Maybe the water is going right through. That would be another good sign that I have nothing but root in there, a little bit less soil, and the tree will be happier if I give it a little bit bigger home. So there's the two products there. Edna's Best potting soil. The pot risers are a great thing. A little recycled kind of tire, rubber. You got small, you got big. They hold hundreds of pounds. I mean, I've got some huge pots and I put those underneath. Never have anything subtle or tip, anything like that. But that's a really easy way to put 4 of those underneath there in a nice pattern, set your container on it, and never worry about, again, the suction or clogging that drain hole. Now, if we look at a few trees, I think I'm doing okay on time today, finally. We're whipping through here pretty fast. We're going to show quite a few trees here. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg, as they say. You know, I think at Sunnyside, should probably count how many are in right now, but I think we're up in the 120 different varieties of Japanese maples on our list. I don't think we've sold out of any quite yet. Some we can't get very many of, others we can get plenty of. So the earlier you come in to shop, the best selection you're going to have. So there's a lot of options, a lot of variation. This is going to maybe give you a little bit of taste of some different things you can look at, okay? Just if you're curious about those two pictures, because I didn't label them. The one on the left, the bright orangey one, is one called Autumn Moon. That is a full moon one that's got beautiful gold, orange color in the spring and the fall. The one on the right is a really cool variegated lace leaf called Suisse. If I have some shade and I like that lime green with a little bit of white in it as we go through the season, that's a really cool a little variegated lace leaf. Now we'll start with lace leaf maples. You know, this is our mounding specimens. These aren't trees. I think most people look at lace leaves and think they can keep a little lace leaf a foot tall and 2 feet wide by pruning. There are some smaller growers, but this is a shrub. It's not some little ground cover plant. You can prune to shape this being weeping, but if I let a lace leaf go, it's going to be staked up or ground either way. But as it grows, it's going to continue to branch on top of itself and get height. Most of these will, you know, only get 5 or 6 feet tall as they get very old, and they'll get wide. You know, typical lace leaves to me, you should have an area that you can probably grow a 6 to 8 foot wide specimen long term. Maybe you've got some shrubs, some perennials and things in there now. As that tree grows, they can be relocated versus packing that beautiful lace leaf back into a little ice cube. I think it'll look much nicer if you let it kind of branch, develop the character and the shape. I think that's one of the prettiest plants in nature. Every yard should have a nice lace leaf maple growing in it for the attributes, for the color, all the things that we've talked about. Now here's a few, you know, kind of varieties to look at. You know, there's lots of reds, there's lots of greens. I don't have a problem with any of that, but I thought maybe I'd show you a little bit different ones. If you want to look a little different than Mrs. Jones next door, everybody has a red one, I think, in their yard when I drive around. But these are just some fun colors. So if I look at a really old school one, and I'm surprised more people don't ask for this one, it's called Goldsmith. That gives me all kinds of color. You know, that's one that leaves out with red, some green, some orange. It changes color in the summer. It's got great fall color. That to me is a little different one that kind of merges all those different colors together. Goldsmith may be one you want to look at. Probably my favorite these days is that Otto's Dissectum. That's a selected one from some guy named Otto, I'm guessing, back in the day. But I love orange, and I like some different color. That's one I have in my yard. That's one we sell a lot of here at the nursery. Maybe I don't want red, I don't want green, I want right in the middle. And this is one that's going to give you some really cool spring color with a touch of orange and spectacular orange fall color too, which is a little bit different than typical lace leaves. You know, to me, if I'm going to go the darkest purple, black, red, anything in there, you're going Red Dragon. You know, that's probably the most heat tolerant one. There's a lot of good red ones out there, but if I want the deepest color, I think you're going to have a tough time beating Red Dragon. That's another one of our more popular ones. I think that's a great picture because you can see a properly pruned one in sections. I can see some branching, and again, the height. You know, I'm not, you know, for me, yes, I have a really old one that I was able to rescue when we bought our house 20 years ago. That's only 3 feet tall and probably 7 feet across. I could easily let that get taller and have maybe a little bit narrower one, again, depending on how you want to train your tree as a gardener. One other one I put on there for green, because there's some great green ones like Waterfall and Viridis. I put Spring Delight on here. It's not one we get a lot of, but if I like that spring color, looks just the same as the greens during the summer, nice fall color. But in spring, it's like I took a little bit of lipstick red lipstick and I put it right on the tips of all those little branches as it leaves out. So if I want, again, a little bit different spring foliage, Spring Delight might be one to kind of look at as well. Now, if we look at a few examples of small shrubby ones, a bunch of these are the ones I have in pots at my yard because I like the colors and I don't have room for more trees. So I think the quintessential maple of all maples, period, is Mikawa Yatsubusa. If you don't have that in your yard in a container, you know, that to me is just speaks Japanese maple. The color, the texture, the branching, one of the prettiest shrubby maples, I think. Very horizontal character, easy one to prune, easy one to grow. That's another one that doesn't get very big down the road. That would certainly be one I would select for a container, for a small spot in the landscape. Either way, you're going to win. Mikawa is a great looking little small maple. I have a candy kitchen. I like the red in a good hot spot out in front of my house. I've got a big old 2-foot by 2-foot jet black pot that I bought a few years ago. This is the one I chose to put right there in front of the house as you walk up in the garden. I'll keep it in a container. Yes, in probably 4 or 5 more years, it's going to outgrow it. And I'll have to, all right, what are we going to do now? But for now, it's a great choice if I like that really nice deep red burgundy spring color, some green with red tips in the summer, and then a really nice scarlet red for the fall. Candy Kitchen, among other good red ones, are some good choices for small. If we look at some strap leaf maples, some people like call these strap leaf, linear lobum type maples, but I almost have that bamboo texture, you know, long, very feathery, delicate foliage. You can see on those 2 pictures, red or green, but I can get a totally different texture with some of these strap leaf types that have a little different airy kind of bamboo appearance in the garden. Koto no Ito, they call the Harp string maple, and that's one of the favorites around here. Really nice lime green color, not super huge, but again, I want that really delicate kind of airy appearance. It really does look like kind of the fairy or harp strings as you look through that. Villa Toronto would be an option where, again, I like that same narrow foliage, but I've also wanted a little bit of touch of red in there as well. That's one that will give me a little bit of color. You know, keep in mind, a lot of times some customers will call me, you know, half a year later when they purchase a really nice strap leaf maple here and go, what's going on? I got 2 different leaves. You know, keep in mind with these in particular, and frankly, some other maples, we'll have 2 totally different foliages when we talk about juvenile growth versus mature. So if you look at a Koto no Ito, the leaves that flush out in the spring will be much thicker and broader and look different than the old foliage, which will be much more narrow and strap-like. So I think it adds some interest, but don't freak out. It's not going to change into a different tree. You're just going to always have that progression of those 2 growths from season to season. Some other fun ones maybe you don't see around as much. Saku Shigata is one. I planted one down in our local arboretum here a number of years ago just for the color. This is a totally different color to me, kind of a bricky red. What some people even call it chocolate red, a little bit different color. I like it because of that and the lime green venation. So when you look at that tree, spring, summer, fall, that's really one that pops for color. It's not a huge grower, a little bit shrubbier, kind of a low vase shape to it. You know, you might get 8 or 10 feet tall on an old Saku Shigata that's very prunable, but certainly a different color if you like something a little bit different. Sumagaki is one of, again, the faves around here. This one always kind of makes me smile. I tried to learn a little Japanese over the years from some folks that know it much better than me. And I'm just like, what does that name mean? It really means nothing to us in English. But Sumagaki literally refers to little harp girl with red painted fingernails. It goes back to an old kind of Japanese mythology. And that is exactly what it is. If you look at that picture, this thing leaps out lime green. It's like I took little red fingernail polish and polished all the ends of those tips. A very, very striking spring foliage maple. If we look at some other options here, Mikazuki, you can see that's the first one we've looked at that we would call reticulated. So if I look at a tree like that and I see a leaf color and then I can see all the different venations on there, maybe it's 2 or 3 different colors together, pinks, greens, whites, apricots. You can find a lot of cool reticulated type maples, or variegated is essentially what that is. Mikazuki is a really cool one. That's what they call the crescent moon maple. Very long, you know, kind of fingery foliage and exquisite color. We've got a few of those around. Benihashi is a great choice for pots. You know, the Americans call that ruby stars. I think we tried to get both names on our list here. We got a really nice supply of those this year in a few different sizes. But that's a great choice for a really small tree with nice red, delicate foliage. Grows well in a pot or the landscape, but it's not going to get super large. Might be a good option for some people looking for something smaller. We look at spring color. I like my orange. You can see it over my shoulder here. That's Katsura, which is a great taller orange spring one. Akane is a great choice for something a little slow, a little bushier and lower. You know, an Akane would be a twiggy maple, a little bit bushier and shrub growth, but I could keep an Akane probably in the 6 or 8 foot tall range. That is electric for orange in the spring, nice green in summer, and then again, really good fall color as well. On the other side there, to me, is something a little bit unique. That's one called Ryusin, or some people call it Ryusai. It looks like a vine. If you look at that picture, I had a buddy of mine years ago train one on his arbor to kind of look like a vine, and that's how it grows. If I grow Ryusin, it's going to stay very narrow and tight, and the branches are going to weep right down. It's not a lace leaf. It doesn't have cut foliage. It's got regular size Acer palmatum or Japanese foliage. Great fall color, but a really interesting growth habit. We've had a lot of folks the last 5-6 years really gravitate towards Ryusin because it's a little different and a little bit unique. I could train that and kind of play with it however I like to. You can see that's a great picture kind of going over a gate entrance to a garden. People would probably look up and say, what is that? That can't be a Japanese maple. It looks like a vine. It's not going to cling like a vine would, but by taking that branch and arching it over, we can get that same effect. A couple other kind of small varieties. Rhode Island Red is one, again, we sell a lot of here. Think of that Rhode Island Red chicken, right? It's got that nice red, crisp color, very tight kind of mushroom shape. That's a great picture of it down from Isley Nursery, the place we get them from. That's, again, slow growing. And yes, if I don't prune it, I might get 10 or 12 feet as we get really old. But that's one I think you'd have great luck in a pot for quite a while. And also doing some pruning on, and maybe you can keep it a little bit smaller. If you want to go more towards the spring color, the Murasaki Kiyohime, or some people just call it Kiyohime, that's got some sweet spring foliage. That's one that would leaf out with that color, green in the summer with a nice red color on the new growth. And then again, orangey red in the fall. A nicely grown Murasaki is almost going to look like a big, wide, round pancake. You know, they don't get super tall, but you would have really low kind of mushroom shape and kind of a large, flat shrub look to it. Really nice, you know, kind of in the Japanese garden setting or a nice landscape bed. Now we get into some big ones. You know, there's a lot of options for big growers. We've got quite a bit here. No, we don't carry trees that are 12, 15 feet tall already. A lot of people email. That's a little big to move, to transplant, and to deliver for sure. But we'll have quite a bit up, you know, in the 7 to 8 foot range on many specimens. It gets you a pretty good sized tree to start with. These are a couple options for red foliage if you want full sun. A lot of green around our landscapes, you know, popping a nice red foliage Japanese maple and really makes a statement during the growing season. Fireglow is probably the #1 planted tree around here. I mean, that is a really common, easy red dwarfish maple to grow. I'm only going to get, you know, maybe in the 12, maybe 15 feet on a really old Fireglow. I'm going to have that beautiful Japanese maple shape with the red color, but not get super tall. If we go kind of in between these two, there's one called Emperor 1 that would get up there 18, maybe 20 feet. And then we go Bloodgood. You know, I want a shade tree size Japanese maple. I want something big and purple red that'll grow over my garden and create some shade. You know, Bloodgood would be the tall one. Those will get up there in the 25-foot range as we get a little bit older. You look at coral bark. I mentioned that. Sangakaku is the tall one. I want to emphasize this because a lot of people come in looking for coral bark. It's a sweet tree with the bark color in the winter. #1, the bark does not always stay coral. It's the youngest wood, 3 years, that stays bright. The trunk goes gray. So you might find a young tree here, the whole thing is coral. The trunk will get gray like other maples, but I will always have that coral color on the wood on the newest growth especially. Now, Sangakaku is big, 25 feet. You can't keep Sangakaku in a little 6-foot circle. That's a big tree. That's going to grow into a nice specimen. There's other coral barks that are dwarf. We have Winter Flame. We have Benikawa. We have Akakawahime. Look at some of those on our list and website. Those are some options for 15 feet, 10 feet, 8 feet, you know, some smaller ones that, yes, I could probably do in a container or have in my yard in a little smaller spot. You know, I've seen some big coral barks around in old gardens and arboretums that are massive. Our one in Everett's probably 25 feet by 25 feet across. It's a beautiful tree, but if you don't have room for that, please don't buy that one. Get a dwarf one, and don't hack your big coral bark into a little ball because it's getting too large. So we can fix that by choosing a different variety. Sherwood Flame is one I was put in the show because I think it's a little different. It's a nice red. I think it's got a more interesting leaf. It's got a little vein color in it. But a lot of times, you know, maybe not so much in the winter because we're going to be deciduous, but I hear from a lot of people like, I'd like a big bushy maple with low branching that I can kind of hide the neighbor's shed, the RV, whatever it is. You know, that would be a good choice for full sun for a big grower that is going to have kind of a lower branching on it. I can limit up if I want to. That's your option. But if I want low branching to the ground, a Sherwood Flame would be an excellent choice for a larger grower. If we talk fall color, you know, top of the list for me, there's a lot of good orange ones out there. We carry quite a few, but look for maybe a Hogioku. We don't get a lot of those. That's another one of my all-time favorites with a nice crisp green in the spring, summer, and that will turn to your pumpkin orange with a little gold in it for fall. That's a nice, upright, taller green one. You will never beat the old Osakazuki for red. You know, that is the creme de la creme for scarlet fall color for a big grower. You know, our Osakazukis down in our local arboretum here are probably 30 feet by 30 feet. That's a big old grower. They're 50 years old. They've been there a long time, but that is spectacular turning color in the fall. If you like red fall color, Osakazuki, big up vase-shaped grower that will get some nice spread to it, create some shade, but certainly be a magnificent for fall color. If we look at some others, summer gold is one. Again, we can't get a lot of these, but if you've got that kind of morning sun, maybe a little bit of afternoon shade situation, that is one that leaps out bright orangey gold and will keep that golden lime color all through the summer and then turn back to orange red in the fall. That's a big tree, you know, another 20-footer, but that's one if you have the right spot underneath some big evergreens, back of the garden a little bit with a little bit of afternoon sun protection, that would be some awesome summer color to brighten up the garden. And punk keel's kind of a newer one we've tried out the last few years. It's a strap leaf, kind of linear lobum like we talked about earlier, but that would be a taller grower, and that's got a really nice burgundy red color. Katsura, you can see, well, wrong shoulder, you can see a big Katsura behind me. That's the creme de la creme for orange in spring. Big grower down the road again. Maybe a little bit small, a little bit smaller with that same color would be Orange Dream. I've never had any problem with Katsura in full sun. Orange Dream I have. I would recommend if you like Orange Dream, and I like it too. That's a great one again for that morning sun, a little bit of afternoon shade protection. That'll keep the color a little bit nicer in the heat of the summer. Tobiosho, again, all about fall color. We go through some Tobioshos here, particularly in the fall. That's a big, round, bushy, full-size maple. If I'm looking for a specimen size tree, you can see by that picture, spectacular fall color on a nice big grower. Arakawa will look very close to the shape of the Tobiosho. That's another big one, but I put the bark in here because that one we would call pine bark maple. So believe it or not, as that tree develops caliper, the bark fissures, looks just like a pine tree, which is really cool in the wintertime. So that would turn bright red in the fall, but also give me the winter interest with some of that cool exfoliating bark. Now, I thought this was a great example. You know, I kind of talked about earlier, the tree of all seasons. You know, give me spring, give me summer, give me fall. I think they all look cool in the winter with the branching myself. You may not as much, but that's your tree. So Shindas Hojo, I think, is a great example. You know, Des Hojo is an old variety of maples, been around centuries. Shin in Japanese just means improved. So most of the time at nurseries now, like Sunnyside, you're going to only find Shindas Hojo. That is an electric tree. If you can see, I'll bring it up after class, but I got one up on the chair here. You know, that one leaps out like a fuchsia red color. It is really bright for spring. That fades in the summer to green with that bright scarlety kind of fuchsia red tip growth, and then we turn color for fall. So I think this is a great example of a tree it's very manageable in size. It can be kept low. You can limit up. This is one I've had in my yard too, that looks totally different. Spring, summer, fall, almost 3 different trees for the 3 different seasons. There's lion's head. You know, we call that Shishigashira. The Americans call it lion's head maple, and that's an easy one to remember. Just remember lion's mane or lion's head. Most nurseries will know you mean Shishigashira. That's the female form. You'll sometimes find Ojishi, which is the male form, a little bit rarer to find, a little bit slower growing too. But Shishigashira makes a beautiful specimen. That's a very unique maple to me, with clumpy growth, almost a little bit of bonsai shape to it. If you look at the individual branches, very clumpy growth, a little bit different growth habit, but certainly a really striking tree for the landscape. This is one that doesn't grow too super fast. Another one you could probably have in a pot for a few years, enjoy the shape, enjoy the foliage, and then move it into the yard as it matures a little bit. But again, I think a really fun one to try. This is one that definitely looks a little different than most of the maples. I've got a big Twombly's at my house, one of the first ones that came out. If I'm looking for a little bit tighter habit, not telephone pole by any means, but I don't want 20 feet of spread. I'd rather have 10. You know, Twombly's would make a little bit nicer, narrower specimen. I wanted a nice red selection for my house in Everett, pretty close to the back of my garage where I could see it, anchored the garden, but I didn't want to prune it off the roof and prune it off the house all the time. Mine's only about 6 feet from the garage wall. It's about 20 years old now. My trunk is huge. It's nice and old, but it has kept that really nice tight shape. I wanted the red color, didn't want the massive spread. So that may be another choice for you for height, but not as quite as much width. Kamagata is another fun one. We call the eagle claw maple. If you looked at the close-up of the foliage on that one, it's got, again, kind of that eagle claw look to it. Really cool foliage. And again, not a super huge grower. That's another, to me, great choice for a large pot for a number of years, or for a smaller garden spot that I don't maybe want a 20-foot or a 15-foot tree, but I'd like something more like 10 or 12 feet. Now, if we look real quick at some of the full moons, you know, essentially everything we've talked about so far has been Acer palmatum. We're not going to make you memorize Latin today. But Acer palmatum is our one variety of Japanese maples. All these are cultivars or flavors of that. Now we get into some different species that, yes, they still are Japanese maples from Japan. So if we look at the golden full moon maple, you don't have to say that word more than once. The Shirawasawanum, that's a tough one to say. But the golden full moon maple, and there's other cultivars of that full moon maple, we call it, are very striking. It looks a little bit maybe more like our vine maple foliage, a little larger, not quite as dissected as typical Acer palmatum, but spectacular foliage color. The full moon maples, the gold one is the poster child. We don't want that in afternoon sun. If you've got a shady spot, understory tree, that thing will glow like lime green gold all through the growing season and then turn orange red in fall. They're very slow growing, but certainly a really good option if you want that bright color for that morning sun or that understory kind of shade garden. That's a great choice for a full moon. On the right there, we have Acer Japonicum, which obviously we derive Japanese again from that. Japonicum maples are a little bit different. I have one in my yard called Ed Wood. Huge foliage, almost looks a little tropical, the Ed Wood does, but Dancing Peacock, the Aconitifolium, there's a lot of options for Japonicum maples too. They tend to get upright and large and wide, and that's another one, maybe a little bit more of a shade tree style. We can grow these in that dappled light. Excellent fall color. Probably the one biggest thing with me with Japonicums is the flower. You know, all plants flower. We're not talking about a rhodey flower, a fuchsia flower. They're not quite that. But all these trees will bloom. We get the little flowers drop. We get the Sumera, the little helicopter seeds, you know, that are fun to watch dangle around the summertime. But the Japonicum is one, if you have one, you know what I mean. You really can see when these things drop their flowers down, they're bright red and go into bloom right before the foliage emerges. So right now in my yard, I just saw my Ed Wood. It's right in front of where I parked my truck. It's in full bloom right now, and it looks spectacular. Then I have the foliage emerge. then we get those little seed heads develop, or the Sumera where we had the flowers. Now here's a couple just shade selections real quick. You know, Coral Magic is one, again, great spring color that's taken in spring if you want something different. I love that Mano no Sato. That's a very unique one with the purple color with lime green on it. That's a really striking maple that's a little bit different. We look at a lot of variegation for those shady spots. Again, morning sun, afternoon shade. We could look at something like Radiant, would give me some nice pink. Ukigumo, we call the floating cloud maple. We struggled to find these this year. I apologize, we don't have any in right now. We'll have eventually, but that one is a lot of white. If I really have a dark, deep dark shade and I want a lot of white with green, Ukigumo may be a good choice for you. Again, reticulated things like Akashigatatsu Sawa, great choices. You can really see the leaf color on there where I've got one color and I almost like I painted the veins on there, put a blush of pink on, and we've got a really interesting foliage to enjoy. Shiraz is one from our friends from the land down under, from the Australians. Shiraz we call Gwen's Rose Delight. Down in Australia, we call it Shiraz. Up here, it's a little shorter. But that's another one, pink, green, white. This one I could actually do in some sun as well, to be honest with you. I'll have more dark color. In shade, I would have more green with white. Little bit more pink and darker tones if I have some more sun on it. Then we look at the ghost series. You know, we get a lot of these ghosts in, and it always makes me kind of smile. We got sister ghost and brother ghost and uncle ghost and grandma ghost, first ghost, baby ghost. I could keep going, but there's a whole bunch of ghost series maples. And again, reticulated, better for that part sun, part shade situation. None of them are super huge. A lot of these are great choices as a container specimen, or again, a manageable size tree to enjoy in that morning sun type garden. I have purple ghost at my house, and that is one that you can have full sun. Mine's about 12 feet by 12 feet after 20 years, and it's right on the southeast corner of my yard with shade garden underneath it. And I never have any burn or anything, and that way I keep that purple color with the rose and the green. All the lighter colored ones definitely you want to have in a little bit of afternoon shade. There's one of my faves, again, that's different, is this Injumai Sunago. We call this the sand sprinkled maple. So this is one I'll get orange in the fall, but if you look at the leaf close up there, very different. That is one with that chocolatey red color, lime green veins. And this, in Japan, they call it Sunagafu. It was an old sand art where you took like a paintbrush and just flecked color onto a surface. This looks like you took a lime green paintbrush and just fleck the leaves, so you'll see lime green spotting on it with a lime green vein. To me, a really different foliage if you like something fun. And Bihu, there's one with the bark color. So that's going to be yellow bark, like coral bark, one that we could grow in shade, and you can see great yellow fall color. That's a popular one around here for shady container growth or a shady garden spot that I don't want something very big. You'll grow a Bihu an awful long time to even get it up in the 8-foot range. That's one very manageable size, I think, for small gardens. Now, the last one here, and we'll do some questions, is this Pacific Rim collection. So this was introduced by Isley Nursery, one of my favorite wholesale growers. They got a great website if you want to go look at pictures of all these maples and some awful fun conifers too. But maples they developed, spent about 20 years breeding these. This is what we call the Pacific Rim collection. So a lot of these are Acer palmatum crossed with Pseudomonas, and that sounds like a tongue twister, but essentially we're taking Japanese maple, crossing it with the Korean species that's hardier for cold temperatures. So now we're able to access maybe some places in Eastern Washington in our state. You know, these trees were tested a lot over the Midwest in the last decade and a half to see how they did with 15 below zero, 20 below zero, and not have any damage. So this may be one for some folks to consider that like Japanese maple, but have struggled with them in maybe a little bit colder climates. So we have stuff like Ice Dragon. You know, that is a lace leaf, shrubby, weeping Japanese maple on steroids. You know, Ice Dragon will get 8 or 9 feet tall, give you that beautiful shape, like a lace leaf maple with great color. That's one I've enjoyed. We've had this one now for a few seasons. Cascadia is the latest one. We got the Cascade Mountains here, so that one obviously calls to me. We just added one of these to the Arboretum in Everett that I'm going to watch grow and mature here over the coming years. That's one with great orange. It's a shrubby grower. It looks like it should be a lace leaf, but it's not. It's not going to weep like a lace leaf maple. It's more of a shrubby one with that same kind of habit, if that makes sense. So you'll have the cut foliage, great color on a smaller specimen. I think Cascadia will be a great winner as well. And then we've got two upright ones. First Flame, right now it's leafing out outside the classroom. I just walked by a couple of our larger specimens. That is orange red like no other in the spring. So that one is at the top of the list for spring color for sure. Nice foliage in summer, great fall color too. If we go reverse with one called Final Fire, nice spring color, good summer color, that I would put at the top of the list for fall color, kind of the Final Fire. And it's got a great name. So think of maybe those four as a different option. You know, we don't have a lot of them around. They're not easy to come by. We do have a few specimens of all those here available at the nursery right now. So there's the slideshow. You didn't do too bad. I made it within an hour. That's a lot of information. But thanks for joining us. You see right there our website. I mentioned we got great information, great pictures on there. Nicole does a lot of work to make sure it's updated and kind of let you know what we have. And then our email, you know, you got any questions, you want to send a picture, you know, we try our best to help everybody. You can certainly come down anytime or certainly email us as well. We are here 7 days a week. So I'm going to stop share here. Okay. So we'll get down to the nitty gritty time here, Nicole. So like always with the classes, you know, we run specials for our local customers here. It's a great one to take advantage if you like Japanese maples. So you got 20% off every maple on the property starting today through next Friday. Take advantage of the discount. That will save you a substantial amount of money if you're looking at a large specimen one as well. But it's a great time to come shop. Great selection right now. You will get 20% off. Just tell them you're at the class. They hit the magic button and you got your discount at the register, okay? You know, I'll be back here tomorrow if you're not tired of looking at my bald head today. Oh, the sun came out. That's nice. I'll be back tomorrow doing a class called Colorful Shrubs. I think it's kind of a fun one we added a couple seasons ago. We have a rhodie class, we have a hydrangea class, we do this, we do roses, all these other shrubs, but we never talk about all the cool stuff in between. So that class is going to focus on spring and summer blooming and foliage shrubs that maybe we use in our landscape that's not talked about in a lot of the other classes we do here at Sunnyside. So tomorrow, 11 a.m., we'll be doing that. You know, in 2 weeks, I'll mention, you know, I'm a rhodie lover. Not everybody loves rhodies, but it's our state flower. In 2 weeks, we have our annual kind of rhododendron festival around here. So I'll have class in 2 weeks on Saturday, 2 weeks from today. We have a great nonprofit here locally to us, the Pilchuck chapter of the American Rhododendron Society. We'll be here doing a trust show. You can look at all kinds of wicked flowers. These folks geek out on rhodies 24/7 for the last 50 years, and they'll show some flowers that will knock your socks off that you just haven't seen anywhere. We'll have some awesome plants available through them to sell that you probably won't find at a lot of nurseries, including ours. I've tried to find their source because they got some awful cool varieties they'll bring in. So we'll have a fun kind of little gallon plant sale, the trust show, and kind of celebrate rhododendrons, azaleas, deciduous azaleas. Well, that'll be kind of in 2 weeks, okay? So now that I've talked too long, first of all, we are going to look, there's Dr. Lola hanging out behind me there again. So really a warm thank you to the Everett Clinic. I mean, it's awesome that they help sponsor these classes once a month. It's a great community company with healthcare. They've got everything you need. You can find them online. If you're in Desire, I go to the Everett Clinic too. I'm an Everett resident, so thank you for taking care of me and my family as well. But we said donation. They don't pay us sponsorship. I'm not getting rich off this. Neither is the nursery. We do it for you guys. So they have literally kicked in 5 $50 gift cards. We're going to have a little race to the computer here to see who wins today. I'm going to give a couple caveats. This is not a typing contest. It's not going to end in 5 seconds. So take your time. If your answer is even close, you'll be considered. We try to make it fair. Nicole keeps a list back there. Everybody who wins these gift cards every month, we're not trying to tell you can't win twice, but yes, we're telling you can't win twice. So if you get picked and you've already been picked, we'll probably pick somebody else to kind of share the wealth a little bit, as they say. So I'm going to ask an easy question. Nicole's going to monitor the chat here, and we'll see who ends up winning. You got some time to throw it in, and then we'll do some questions as well. Okay. So we talked about all kinds of maples today. What was the kind of maple that grows like a shrub and weeps down towards the ground? Doesn't get super big, but it's got nice foliage and it weeps down towards the ground. That should be an easy one. I hope everybody knows the answer to, okay? So thanks for joining us. Let's see, we got any questions going, Nicole?
Yeah, we do. So when Trevor means the chat, it means that Q&A bubble button that's at the bottom there. I think most of you have been using it for most of our classes or throughout the day today. So if you raise your hand, it's not quite going to count. I see some of you trying to put your hands up, but type your answer in that Q&A bubble at the bottom. And, you know, I'll pick 5 random winners like Trevor mentioned. So because they're coming in fast and furiously. So good job. I feel like everybody so far is getting the right answer. Nice job.
Go.
So can you tell us what varieties you have behind you? I mean, we've talked about all these pictures, but what do you have there? I'm
going to stand up and I'll say this before I do. I am a short wearer, whether it's winter, spring, summer. Don't laugh at my white legs. It is cold today, but I said a week ago, I'm putting shorts on and I'm not taking them off for 5 months. So there you go.
A man of his word.
So if I look right here, see to the right of lovely Dr. Lola here. So this is Rhode Island Red. Okay, this is one again, a little bit bushier, a little bit lower. You can see the spring color. If I look right in front here, this is that strap leaf we were talking about. So that is a Koto no Ito, the little harp string maple. That's always lime green in the spring here. And then we'll turn a golden harp color in the fall as we turn. If you look up behind here, see a little red poking out on top. That's a shrubby one like Candy Kitchen. I think that one's Elizabeth, which I didn't show on the show, but that would be Candy Kitchen, Elizabeth, Shayna, any of those nice dwarf, kind of twiggy, dark red ones. We've got one of those in here. If I show in the front here, I can't say the name because it would be the answer to the question I just asked everybody, but that would be a variety of, well, we'll just say it, lace leaf maple, which was the answer to your question. Hopefully everybody's answered. That is one called Crimson Queen, so that'll be our little mounding one. I kept talking about the Katsura. You can see that orange color. We've got a coral bark. If I bring it a little closer, you can see the bright coral colored wood on there. Not the nice green inside. Well, I said we have some dwarfs out there, and this is what I was talking about. Let me pull it down here. I'll do a sideways across the screen here. So that is Shinda's Hojo. You can see just leafing out, but look at the bright color on that. That is spectacular. So then it will be that way here for about 6 weeks. And then as that matures, we'll have the green with a little bit of light variegation. And then I'll have that same kind of fuchsia color come out on the new growth in the summer. So hopefully I didn't blind anybody with my white legs, but there you go. There's a couple. I did put 2 off to the side here. The staff brought in. They said, you got to show these 2. So I'll just show you real quick. That's kind of washed out in the light in here, but you can see again that leafing out. This is one we had in the show called Coral Magic. So you can see that yellow with that bright coral pink color. That is really sweet for spring. And another little dwarf one we showed in the slide is that Murasaki Kiyohime. You can see a little bit shrubby or lower grower, but again, if I look at that foliage, really nice in spring. Instead of just more green, I've got that nice orange red kind of margin on every one of the little leaves too. I think that was all of them.
Yeah, the only problem is your computer audio. When you stand up and move, it doesn't track you as well. So we missed some. Okay. I know.
So let's go this way. Rhode Island Red, right here. Okay, you can hear me now. If I lean back, Koto no Ito, that's the strap leaf one. Crimson Queen, lace leaf was the answer to the question. Sorry. There's Sangukaku, that's the large coral bark. Katsura is the orange. And that one I hauled up, you can see poking over there with the bright fuchsia. That's the Shinda's Hojo.
Better. Thank you. That was awesome. So we had a question about, you know, we mentioned in the beginning when you've got diseases or things in your pruning to make sure you clean and sterilize. What do you use to sterilize and clean them?
You know, I just keep a little can of rubbing alcohol in the garage. If I'm out pruning, you know, I'll just grab a towel, wet it with rubbing alcohol, wipe the blades down to sterilize. Some people mix a little bleach. I don't have a problem with that too, and then rinse it off. Anything that will sterilize. I think rubbing alcohol is about the easiest thing.
Okay, good to know. Quick sidebar. So I told everybody, if you were one of our lucky winners, I responded to you privately, but Fran, Karen, Mary, Keith, and Patty, congratulations. We'll have those here at the nursery for you before we continue on. Nice job. Everybody pretty much had all the right answers. So great job.
They were listening today.
So what about, can you do underplantings? You know, can you plant things under Japanese maples? What's the best?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every one of my maples in my yard's got substantial underplantings underneath it. Again, kind of depending on how you prune, we can always thin, like we talked about earlier, to get more light through. But typically for me, it's things like azaleas, dwarf rhododendrons, hostas, hellebores, epimedium. I mean, it'll go on and on. A lot of those kind of part shade plants, if we're getting a lot of shade. Certainly in some locations, like the front of my yard facing south, it's the opposite. You know, the back side of it's got more shade. The front side of it's got a lot of hot loving plants. But yes, absolutely, garden underneath it. I would always layer, you know, in the landscape. You know, the maple's your specimen, your focal point. We go down a level with shrub, some perennials, ground cover, whatever your thing is. You can certainly have multiple layers. And I would, you know, to me, you know, I love flowers. Don't get me wrong. I got plenty of that, but I love foliage. So if I'm looking at, you know, a red Japanese maple specimen, I'm looking at things underneath that are going to pop with the color. I want, you know, yellow variegated on green hostas. I'm looking for something with bright white, you know, whatever your foliage taste is, play off the tree as well. You know, if I got a green tree, let's get something with some red underneath it. If I got a red tree, let's get something with some green underneath it, kind of thing.
Cool. Great suggestions. Thank you. I love that. I love it when you make it easy, because sometimes it's so intimidating. We talk about this almost all the subjects that, you know, there's so many maples, there's so many plants. And
if you've got good drainage, it does not get any easier than maple. I mean, that is a perfect little small garden tree for around here. I think one of the easiest things to grow and prune and keep manageable in size, but you got to have the drainage. Just make sure you're not too wet.
Good tips. So you mentioned the Evergreen Arboretum in Everett. What's the best time to go see the maples, specifically in the spring?
You know, I'm down there doing tours to some of our visitors as a volunteer quite a bit of time. We've got one of the largest collections on the West Coast, some really old ones, and I keep finding places to add new ones in as well. To me, honestly, if you really wanted to look at them, you got to go for a walk here at some time in that mid-late April time frame. You'll see all the spring foliages, and you have got to go down there in like early October and look at the fall color. The fall color, second to none for sure, is the one time a year I would go, but I would give it a visit in spring. We've had a lot of existing maples that were there before my time, but in the last, you know, 12, 15 years I've been involved, we've added a lot of spring foliage maples, a lot of new lace leaves, and a lot of smaller growers, kind of more as a demonstration to homeowners of what they can do in their yard.
Gotcha. Good to know. It's always a fun trip to go down there. So I love the Arboretum. Glad that
go for a little walkabout, we call it. Go for a little walkabout amongst the trees.
I like that. So we talked about, you know, maples are good in containers, or at least some varieties, and how to make sure that, you know, they're not too root bound and all of that. But how do you go about picking a container in the beginning? Do you have tips, kind of general advice to follow?
Well, yeah, for me, I mean, you'll see some of that on the container maple sheet if you access that on the website. But I'm always going for something frost proof. I don't want plastic. I don't want terracotta. I don't mind wood. I've done some cedar, that kind of thing. But I want a pot, and I want to have it for like my children someday. So I buy higher quality frost-proof pots that I can recycle trees and plant a new one in if I want to. You know, for size, it's really tough because depending on which one you choose will dictate a little bit. But I'll just say this: if you buy, you know, let's say a 2 foot wide, 2 foot deep container, you know, I can grow a lot of these dwarfish, semi-dwarf, smaller growers for probably 10 years in there before I'm going to have any kind of root bound issues. A larger tree, you know, probably cut that in half. It's going to run out of root space a little bit more. You know, do I have all of mine in 2-foot pots? No. You know, I've got some fun ones that I'll take a gallon home here. Oh, I want to try one of those. I'll get a smaller pot, grow for a few years, and then go into a bigger one. But typically I would look for something 2 by 2 by 2 for more of a permanent home. The other thing I would really suggest you, and gardening is always the ultimate trial and error excursion to me. Somebody else erred like me, so you don't have to. If you're looking at doing something in a pot like that, and for me, again, I'm not interested in growing my maple for 8 years and falling in love with it, perfect pruning, and I want to keep it, and then, wow, I can't get it out of the pot later. Now what am I going to do? Just chop it off and throw it in the compost? That's not what this is about. I guess you're welcome to if that's your thing, but I would try to save it. So, you know, for me, you know, 20 years ago, I was going for the really cool vase-shaped pots, and oh, that's really fun and that's awesome. Cool for flowers, but man, when you go to try to get your tree back out of there, may the force be with you kind of thing, because it's a lot. You know, I want a pot that's belly shaped. I want straight up sides. I don't want that fluting back into a narrow rim. They look really cool. Sometimes you can get away with it, but I mean, I've had to pull out the Sawzall and, you know, chop around the rim to try to get my tree back out of a vase-shaped pot and try to save it. It's a lot more difficult to do that. So I would look for a, you know, a bowl, a belly pot, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't have those sides that are fluted in myself.
And as a reminder, what's the best time of year to transplant these maples?
Well, again, if we're talking transplant, if I'm going from in my yard for a few years and I want to relocate it in my yard, I would try to talk you out of doing it at this point. I think we're past the point of no return. We got to do that November, December, January, February, before sap flows and we leaf out. If you're talking about from a container into the yard, I don't have a problem with that really any time of the year, except right now. If you're like mine in my yard and the ones here, we're just leafing out. We've got a lot of sap moving, foliage is coming out. I would just wait 2-3 weeks for those leaves to fully emerge and say, okay, I'm ready for springtime. All right, let's get you out of that pot, move you to a new home, and we'll have a happy camper.
Good to know. You mentioned the fertilizer in the beginning, and can you remind us what the numbers are for those?
Well, again, you know, this is a tough one for me because every grower, I hate to tell you, is going to put liquid food on anything to get, because they want to get it big and they want me to buy it and they want you to buy it from me as quick as possible. So you might come in here and see maples that shot up 1.5 feet last year. They're going to grow like 6 or 8 inches in a typical landscape. So let me say that first. So I would not use Miracle Grow, liquid feed, any of that stuff. I'd save that for your flowers and baskets. I want an organic, granular, slow feeds, doesn't move out of the soil. It's going to keep my tree happy season to season. So I put up the picture of that tree shrub food from E.B. Stone. It's 722. You know, I'll be honest, you got a bag of the organic roadie food. Sweet. That works fine with me. I mean, there's a lot of fertilizers that would work. If you're going to buy something specific, I would go for that tree shrub food. It's actually got a picture of a lace leaf maple on the front of the bag finally, which I think is a great idea. But because we just need nitrogen, we want healthy foliage, we want a nice flusher growth. I'm not blooming per se. I don't need anything, you know, phosphorus, potassium wise, but that 722 or something close to it would be ideal.
Okay, good to know. What about, somebody mentioned the mycorrhizal fungus? Yep. Yeah, tongue twister. Do you recommend planting in the ground with that for Japanese maples?
Well, mycorrhizae, A, never hurts anything. B, it doesn't associate with all plants, but it absolutely is going to help maples. All the fertilizers I showed today, E.B. Stone, everything has mycorrhizae included. So if you're asking me if you should look online and buy a little jar of mycorrhizae, yeah, I guess if you want to do it that way, that's fine. I would rather have you get a quality fertilizer like E.B. Stone. It's got everything in there you'd ever need anyway. I've got endo and ecto mycorrhizae in the right amounts that's going to energize my soil, attach to the root system, and then off we go.
Okay, cool. I like that it's already built in. Make it easy, right?
Yep, exactly.
So that last collection, the Pacific Rim varieties that you talked about there at the end, are those, specialized question here, are those grafted?
Okay, all maples are grafted, period. If you're going to find it at a nursery, I kind of said that at the beginning, because I think sometimes there's a little, I don't know, is that growing from a seed or what they do? All, you know, named cultivars, flavors, variety, whatever you want to call it. I like flavors, kind of sounds fun. That's always going to be grafted on Acer palmatum rootstock. So it's a different root. It doesn't matter the tree. Yes, when you buy one, watch it when they're young. I brought some maples in here. If I watch this little starter tree here, I can guarantee you I'm going to probably get a couple of little buds that want to start out below the graft that I will just pinch off here in the spring. It's not going to happen forever, and I'm done with it. You know, so it'll be a different tree. If you let that grow, I see it a lot on lace leaves around. Again, the answer to the question, lace leaf maples, they have a little mounding shape to it. Something happened at the ground level, and here comes a branch up, and I'll drive by somebody's yard like, wow, can I get my saw and cut that out for you? Because now you have a 20-foot green seedling maple trying to grow out of the middle of a little dwarf lace leaf maple. So watch the suckering when they're really young. It doesn't happen forever. But yes, they would all be absolutely grafted, including the Pacific Rim.
Way to dispel that little, we've got it. Now we've got the facts. So what I think is great, there's been some questions about sizes. We carry a wide selection of sizes because sometimes you just don't want to wait and you want that bigger tree. We don't carry anything super huge, but maybe you want something 6 to 7 feet tall. There's some larger ones kind of behind Trevor and bigger ones in the nursery. But we've also got like the one he just showed, the smaller, the 1-2 gallon sizes that make it much more cost efficient in some of these cases, especially with discounts and things like that to help. But then you can kind of check out all the varieties. It's not just kind of these few that we lock ourselves into. Like Trevor mentioned, there's over 120 you said on the property?
We got about 120 around here usually. So, and again, some of them we can replace. I can get more. Others I got one shot a year. We have 5 plants and that's it. They're just hard to find. When I would add to Nicole, that's a great point. Do I want to spend the money and get something big? Do I got time to wait? I've done it both ways. There's areas in my yard, I want instant gratification. I want something big and I want in the garden. I like to play around with a lot of the 1 2 gallons. That's my container stuff. Like, oh, I want to try that one. I can prune it how I want. I can train it how I want. I can kind of play with it that way. It's kind of fun too. But, I'm always happy. I never promise because some of these are really hard to find. But, I'm always happy to look for something for you. If you're like, hey, I saw you got gallon, can't you get me something bigger? The answer might be no right off the bat. That's not going to ever happen, but I'm more than welcome to try. We keep a wish list here. We're happy to give you a heads up. Maybe we'll have bigger ones in the fall to plant. Great time to plant too. If you're patient, we may be able to help you out with that as well.
Yeah. And with all of the varieties, like we mentioned before, it can be kind of intimidating and a little daunting, but Trevor is great. Every year we put together a list. And so not only can you see all the maple varieties we carry, but also like just a little quick 1-sentence attribute so that you kind of see why would you want that maple and how tall does it get? What's its spring color? That's up on our website as well as, all the pictures. So if you're not close to us right now, or you have plans today, check out everything online on our website before you come down. And we're happy to help you, here in the nursery or via email. If you have certain specifications of what you're looking for, but you're not really sure what varieties fit you, we're more than happy to help recommend some varieties. We love talking plants. Trevor obviously loves talking plants. He's so great at these classes. We're so grateful for him. But he's here in the nursery all the time, as well as a whole host of experts that we have around the nursery. Happy to help pick stuff out. It's like shopping for them too, with sending it home for you to care and love for. So yeah, come down and see us, visit, hang out, say hello. We like to see who's on the other side of the screen. And then we'll be back tomorrow for Colorful Shrubs. Super exciting. Thanks again, Everett Clinic. We really appreciate you for what you do in the community and for us here at Sunnyside. And hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks everybody for joining us. This is always a fun class. It's not too bad of weather today. You can come down and do some shopping. Spring has sprung, so we do have lots of goodies down here. We'll see you soon, hopefully tomorrow.